But as we start on the road of the miracle of forgiving, we begin to see our enemy through a cleaner lens, less kind of smudged by just the hate we feel. To begin to see a real person, a hodgepodge of both meanness and decency, of both lies and truth, of both good and evil. We start to see a human being who has been created to be a child of God. Now, forgiving our enemy doesn't immediately turn them into a close friend, doesn't immediately turn them into a promising husband, doesn't immediately turn them into a trustworthy partner. We certainly don't diminish the wrong that they've done to us. But we don't blind ourselves to the reality that they're perfectly capable of doing to us again what they've already done. But what we do is we start to see them anew as a person who shares in our own faulty humanity, that they're bruised like us, that they're faulty like us, still thoroughly blamable for what they've done, yet they're human like us. That's maybe the first step towards the miracle of forgiveness. Now, the second stage is surrendering a right that we have to get even. I read this week a story about two brothers who went to their rabbi to settle this long-standing family feud, and the rabbi got the two to reconcile their differences, and in the end they even shook hands. And as they were about to leave, the rabbi thought that he'd have them make a wish for each other in honor of the Jewish New Year. And so the first brother turned to the second brother and said, "I wish for you what you wished for me." And at that, the second brother kind of threw up his arms and turned to the rabbi and said, "See, Rabbi, he's starting all over again." Right? The problem is, after we've been wronged, right, and in being wronged, we've also been wounded, whether we've been swindled or cheated, abused, demeaned, no human right seems more sacred, more precious to us than the right to get even with that scab who wronged us. We want to get back at them. We want to make them feel, at the very least, as much pain as they caused us. We want vengeance. But I think we know that, as Alan Guelzo has once pointedly put it, the one who pursues revenge should dig two graves. And as we move along a step or two towards the path of forgiving, we hold this right that we have to vengeance, right? We have it, and we hold it in our two hands, and then we take maybe a longing look at it, and then we let it spill to the ground like a handful of water. And to many effects with good riddance. But of course, we have to take care, right? When you give up vengeance, you have to make sure you're not giving up justice. I mean, vengeance, on the one hand, is our own pleasure at seeing someone who hurt us, getting it back, and then some. But on the other hand, justice is secured when somebody gets a fair penalty for wronging another, even if the injured person takes no pleasure in the transaction. Vengeance is personal satisfaction. Justice is moral accounting. And forgiving surrenders the right to vengeance, but it never surrenders the claim of justice. Now, sometimes we get close to justice, right? But we can never bring closure to vengeance, right? In the exchange of pain, the accounts, they just never balance out, right? And the reason is kind of simple, right? Whenever I'm on the receiving end, the pain that you caused me always feels worse than the pain that I cause you. And when I'm on the giving end, the pain that I cause you never seems as bad to me as the pain that you cause me. And this is why famous family feuds go on to the third and fourth generation. Vengeance, by its very nature, can't bring resolution, ever. It'll never be enough. There's only one thing. There's only one thing that breaks the cycle of brokenness, and that's forgiveness, if we let it, right? So what is needed, for example, in the Middle East? Well, I don't know exactly, but as Palestinians and Israelis made the headlines again this week, one thing is certain. Forgiveness is needed in the Middle East. The pattern of vengeance has solved nothing. Only forgiveness can break the stranglehold of sin. So once we've kind of rediscovered the humanity of the offender and given up our right to get even, we start to perhaps begin to feel new feelings towards them personally. We experience them differently after we see them differently. Back to the theme, to err is human, to forgive is not company policy. And I dare say it's not just not company policy, but it's our own unwritten code that keeps us from forgiving. So on that road to forgiveness, we have to admit that what we felt before was simple hate. I mean, sure, we may disguise it so that we won't have to even recognize the hate in ourselves, but it's there. Hate's hate, right? No matter how we pass it off. Make no illusions, there are people that you and I hate. I mean, now, it could be a kind of a passive hate, right, where that makes us simply feel good when we hear bad things have happened to the person who wronged us, but that's also hate. Or it could be an active or an aggressive hate, screaming at the other person that they would feel pain, or at least the size of ours. And whether passive or aggressive, our hurt leaves us calling heaven to make bad things happen to the bad person who did bad things to us. I mean, that's hate. When we begin to forgive, however, we feel a real, although sometimes reluctant, wish that some good things might come the weasel's way, right? I mean, at first we kind of muffle our demands, right? That God would make, bad things happen. And we just kind of slow down our demands of God that bad things would happen to them. And then, maybe we hear that they're getting remarried. Or maybe we hear they're taking a job in Calgary or parts further east. And then we might even at that news feel a nudge of hope for mildly good things to happen to them. And that feeling of goodwill is likely to be very weak and very hesitant at first. And we are almost bound to backslide into malice along the way. But if there are any stirrings of benevolence within us, if there's any hint that it will be all right with us, if some small bit of good fortune comes our enemy's way, we can be sure that we are teaming with God in this modest miracle of healing. Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch Christian Holocaust survivor whose family helped numerous Jews escape the Nazis during World War II. And in her autobiography, The Hiding Place, she tells of not being able to forget a wrong. Right? She in her mind, she had forgiven the person, but she kept rehashing the incident, and she couldn't even sleep. And finally, help came to her in the form of a Lutheran pastor. And he said to her, up in the church tower is a bell, which is rung by pulling a rope. But you know what? After the sexton pulls the rope and he lets go of the rope, the bell, it keeps on swinging. First ding, then dong, slower and slower and slower until at least there's a final dong and it stops. I believe the same is true of forgiveness. When we forgive, we take our hand off the rope. But if we've been tugging at our grievances for a long time, we mustn't be surprised if the old angry thoughts keep coming for a while. They're just the ding-dongs of the old bell slowing down. Both of the servants in Jesus' parable hungered for forgiveness. And each of us has a similar hunger, I would dare say. But not only do we find relief in being forgiven, we find rest in forgiving. Smedes, one more time. He writes, to forgive is to put down your 50-pound pack after a 10-mile climb up a mountain. To forgive is to fall into a chair after a 15-mile marathon. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that that prisoner was you. To forgive is to reach back into your hurting past and recreate it in your memory so that you can begin again. To forgive is to dance to the beat of God's forgiving heart. It is to ride the crest of love's strongest wave. when we forgive the things that are worth forgiving, when we forgive the things that forgiving is for, we copy God's own art. Now, this is what I do not want you to remember. To err is human, to arr is pirate. But this is what I do want you to remember. To err is human, to forgive divine. Right? God is the original, the master forgiver. And through the cross of Jesus Christ, he has forgiven us a debt of $1 bazillion. Right? It's just unpayable. And each time we kind of grope our reluctant way through the minor miracle of forgiving, we're imitating his style. And so we try to imitate God's masterpiece of forgiveness, right? The masterpiece of Jesus Christ on the cross. And feebly we do so at first with uncertainty and hesitancy. And we kind of need this kind of paint-by-number help from the master artist. But the whole way through, the master works through our hearts and through our hands, through his spirit living in us. And he strengthens us to pick up the paintbrush again and again and again, to be diligent in the craft, because our lives need the outlet that only forgiveness can provide. And the world craves the art of forgiveness more than anything. And because the master artist created us in his image, he designed us to imitate this art of forgiveness. It's no accident that in the Lord's Prayer, "Give us this day our daily bread," is followed immediately by the petition we're looking at. "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." Right? Seeing forgiveness as is every much a daily matter as eating and drinking. That helps us see this in perspective. We're faulty folks, right? We need to be forgiven constantly. And the more keenly we are aware of us getting that gift from God every day, the more inclined we are to distribute it to those who are in need of healing and a restorative word from us. So, do you feel good? Do you feel relieved? Do you feel joyful when through the Holy Spirit you hear God say to you every single day, "You are forgiven"? If so, then when there is an equally flawed person who is in your debt because of mistakes or sins or lapses, will you let her experience the same kind of joy by hearing you say, "I forgive you"? Right? God forgives us daily. We forgive others daily. I mean, every day we carry around with us this kind of mental list of people we could forgive. I mean, some of the names on that list probably have been there a while, whereas others appear and disappear quite quickly. There may even be certain names on that list that, your spouse, your coworker, which appear on the list pretty regularly, but which also get erased pretty regularly as you exercise the daily task of forgiving just as you have been forgiven. Right? Forgiveness, it's our lifestyle. It's our habit. We do it every day for the same reason that we eat every day. We need it to stay healthy. And by doing it every day, we become a little more spiritually limber. And the daily habit of forgiveness is also a good way to stay in shape should a day arrive when we have something very major to forgive. The more practiced we are at forgiving, the more practiced we are at forgiving those ordinary foibles and annoyances in life, the better poised we may be to forgive an extraordinary hurt. But nothing enables us to forgive like knowing in our hearts that we have been forgiven. Now, I want to conclude with another illustration from Corrie ten Boom. I told this to you according to my notes 7 years ago, so if you remember it, that's why. But she tells about her travels after World War II. And she was talking at various places. She's telling her sister Betsy's story, who she watched die in a concentration camp. And this is what ten Boom writes. She writes, "I was at a church service in Munich, and I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower room door in the processing center at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen since that time, and suddenly it was just all there. The room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. he came up to me